Hi, and welcome to the second season of Diversity in Leadership. My name is Holta Loco, and I'll be speaking with leading lawyers from diverse backgrounds about their stories and career highlights in the hope of inspiring the next generation of lawyers from underprivileged backgrounds. We've got a really exciting season lined up for you, and to kick off our new series, I'm delighted to be joined by Miriam González Durántez. Miriam is the head of trade and EU regulation at international law firm Cohen Gresser and vice chair of board at UBS ESC. She's also the founder and chair of Inspiring Girls, an amazing charity that helps connect young girls to female role models. We had a really interesting chat about her career as an international trade lawyer, the challenges she's faced, and the advice that she would give to her younger self. I hope you enjoy it, and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Miriam, thank you so much for joining us. I've been really looking forward to having you on our podcasts, and I thought it was really interesting to hear a little bit more about your story and how you came from growing up in a village in Spain to becoming head of trade and EU regulation at an international law firm.
How did I do that? Well, I was born in a small town, a village really in Spain, and I was the typical small girl of that period, which was the period of transition to democracy in my country, that actually had a very big impact on me and on my political understanding later on, because it was a very, very positive moment. I went to school in my village, the primary and secondary school, and then I went to university, to the closest university, because that is what girls at the time did. So my father didn't want me too far away, but I was also the kind of girl who asked for everything, that anytime that there was a possibility for a scholarship or a contest or an award or whatever, I was always participating there. I was very active. And I got a scholarship to go to the College of Europe in Bruges to study European affairs. And it was a really important time for me, first because at a personal level, I met my current husband, Nick Clegg, but also because it was the very first time that I could see lots of different people from different backgrounds, different countries, and that we all thought different things, but nevertheless we could work together, and build something together. And from that, I went to work at the European Union in Brussels, that as a trade negotiator first, and then I did foreign affairs. But again, that was a very defining moment for me, because I discovered multilateralism and the big international projects, and everything in my life has gone in the direction of realizing that you can work with lots of different people from different walks of life, and that not everybody has to be like you to be able to do something positive with them. And at one point I had already started having children. I have 3 boys. We were getting a little bit restless in Brussels. My husband wanted to do politics in the UK, and I decided that London was a good place for me to try something different. So we went to live in London, and there it was really, really just by chance, because I was doing foreign affairs and trade at the time, that I found a law firm, DLA Piper at the time, who was keen to start a practice on trade, and they allowed me to set up the first trade-only practice in the city of London. And I was much more interested in the business side of it, if you know what I mean, than the legal side of it. I thought it was great that we could just do a trade-only practice. It was very successful, and from there I continued in private practice, but I'm a lawyer by chance, really.
That's amazing. There's so much to unpack from that. You mentioned as a girl, you were always the one that puts your hand up for scholarship and other things. What do you think that was? Was that an education, parents, or just your personality? What inspired you to be like that?
Well, I'm sure that there is a little bit of everything. I'm a restless person altogether. So whenever I'm in a job for 3-4 years, I'm constantly thinking, well, what now? What can I learn now? No? But I'm very much the product of my circumstances and my education. I mentioned it earlier. This was the transition to democracy in Spain. I came from a typical middle-class family with working-class grandparents. My father and mother were the first ones in their families to go to university, but it was such a positive moment. Like, we thought that if you studied hard, you could get to do whatever you wanted. Our parents really instilled that in us. My grandfather, who had, he was a self-taught man, but he read a lot. He was the biggest feminist I know. He kept telling us, economic independence is the key to happiness for girls. You really need to try hard. So I had a community, so to speak, pushing me also to try new things. And I'm super grateful for all that, because I realized that they gave me something that is very, very special, truly special in life, which is to be able to have roots. And I have very strong roots. But they also gave me wings, no? And to put that together is quite magical when it happens.
Absolutely. And the sense of meritocracy as well, in terms of working hard, you can achieve everything. Is that something that you believe in, and is that something that you instill in your children?
I do believe in it, but I'm also very frustrated by it. So in the same manner that I tell you that I was super lucky to be in that period of meritocracy, of, with you and your effort, you can do whatever it is. I'm also very frustrated that in Spain, the system is still quite closed, that, you need to be in the right network, and you need to accommodate to the right codes to be able to do things. I have to say that when I went to the UK, for me, it was a big period of freedom to be in London. I remember when I started looking for jobs, and I was being asked, so what do you want to do? And for me, that was such a revelation. It was a key moment. It's like, what do you mean that I can do whatever I want? That is not that because I have studied law, I have to be a lawyer, or because I have studied economy, I have to be an economist, which is how it happened, and it still happens. In Spain. So that was great, but also, getting deeper into the system, I have seen in the UK also the power of the networks. And now I am in the US with the American dream, that it seems that, everybody can do whatever they wish. And here at the core of Silicon Valley is exactly the same. The networks continue being very strong. So yes, I do believe in meritocracy, but my message is that there is a lot of work to be done to break all the structures, really.
Yeah. And where can we begin with that work? Obviously, we've spoken about it for so long now. And I think you mentioned in the past, the progression hasn't been as fast as it should be. What kind of action should we be taking to increase gender equality, I guess, especially post-COVID, where, it's had such a regressive impact on gender equality?
Well, I think that the mistake that we normally make is that for me, there are 3 legs. And very often, many of us only focus on one leg. So there is the personal side of it. And I do think, we have had endless discussions in the gender equality community as to whether it is right to put the focus on the women themselves or not. And that, this should not be just about we women are broken and you fix us and then this is going to be fine. But I do think that there is an issue there sometimes of lack of self-confidence, that in an organization I lead, Inspiring Girls, we work a lot on that with girls so that we eliminate that very early on. But I feel it myself, I very often have to push myself, and I think, oh God, if I'm not 150% perfect for this job or this mandate, it's going to be a disaster. And there comes somebody else who is not perfect at all and gets it. So there is a constant personal work that we women, or some of us women, need to do on that. I think that many of us have focused also on companies. So what can companies do? And I think that there, perhaps, some of what the pandemic has done may not be also bad. You know, it has opened up the possibility of flexible working more generally for both women and men. I'm very frustrated really that that this flexibility has had to come either because of a generational change, that the millennials are not so happy to spend all the time in the office, or a pandemic rather than because of gender equality. But there you are. I think that is positive for everybody. And I do think that there is a lot of work being done by companies now on how to reintegrate women during the maternity years, and something very positive that I have seen, of course, not every company, but many of them, that they are copying each other and they really are sharing information about best practices. So I think that that keeps going in the right direction generally. But then there is the public policy. And a lot of work needs to be done on public policy, for example, on childcare, for example, on the tax treatment of the help that families need to be able to work during the maternity years, but also whenever they have somebody that they have to care for in the family, whether they are young or elderly. And you know, the governments are kind of thinking that this problem, you know, this has nothing to do with them. This will be sorted out by society. It's like, no. This is a public policy discussion, and it's not only for women, it's for everybody.
Absolutely. There's so much, I think, to unpack from that. On your first point regarding self-confidence, why do you think that it does affect so many women, and what have you done to overcome it?
Well, we do a lot of work, as I mentioned earlier, with girls, and we see that from the age of 12 to 16, more or less, there is a self-confidence gap of around 30%, which is huge. And you think, well, why is this happening? Well, it happens because from the age of 6, which is a very, very shocking figure, that, you know, the age of 6, boys and girls start looking at jobs, for example, like female and male jobs. So you can see at the age of 6, the impact of gender stereotypes. And those boys and girls are not born with a program thing in their mind saying, well, you are going to look at society like this. What happens to those boys and girls is us, the way in which we have internalized stereotypes and a certain way of living in society that makes them start seeing men and women differently. At the age of 12 is when you can see, you know, anybody with daughters or nieces will be familiar with this. Many of them start giving up subjects because they think that they are not for them. It tends to be the STEM subjects. They give up the sports because they think that they are for boys. And I think that that is the beginning of a long journey, that if you don't manage to get rid of that very early on, it goes with you through life. And many of us, you know, have built our whole careers with that at the back of my mind. At a personal level, I have had that very often. I have been very lucky that I always had people around me saying, no, no, you can do this. And of course you should. And if you're feeling too comfortable, this is not the right spot for you. So try something a bit more adventurous. And I think that if you work a lot, if you have it, if you work a lot on it, you can turn it to the positive. So I have done myself a lot of work mentally on trying to identify the fear. And sometimes now I leave the fear there. Provided I can identify it, I leave it there, because I know that sometimes it can give me that sharper edge sometimes. But you know, if you have it, you have to accept it and work with it, and hopefully it will go with that. And also remember your good moments. You know, it's every single one of us has done something that you think about yourself, wow, you know, this was great. And just remember that moment as a picture in your mind, because if you have done that, you can do many other things.
You meant, in what way do you think it can give us a sharper edge?
Well, I work on the basis of adrenaline, really. And sometimes when I don't feel very comfortable is when I'm at my best, because it's when I prepare most, when I make most of an effort. So that kind of works for me. But, you know, everybody needs to find the way to deal with it. I think that lack of self-confidence is something that I keep hearing from women. You know, I have seen it myself in the workplace, you know, some wonderful women that never ask for a promotion, that that never, I remember doing in some of the firms where I have done boasting day, where the women had to say how wonderful they were. And you could see how difficult they found it sometimes. So you can work on those things if you have it. But I think that the best would be to get rid of it earlier.
And what can firms do with regards to that? One of the things that you mentioned was the childcare and the support, particularly the support that people need when they can't financially afford a nanny, and that particular period is where we find most people, particularly women, leave law. What can firms do in order to stop that happening?
I think that it's a lot that they are also already doing. I think that the only frustration is that a lot of this has focus on the maternity leave period, but that is not the only period, right? So you come back, you decide to have children, suddenly you have many more responsibility. By this time, normally women not only have the extra burden that they are the primary carers of the children. In most of the cases, there are always exceptions, but also they tend to take up more responsibility on the handling of the houses. For a long time, we thought, that is private business, but we have seen during the pandemic that is not private business. If we do not have schools and places for childcare, and if nobody comes to help on some of the handling of the houses of those who are really, really busy, those people cannot work. If they cannot work, they cannot produce. If they cannot produce, they cannot pay taxes. If they cannot pay taxes, we cannot pay for hospitals and roads, etc., etc. So there is a public debate that I don't think that the companies can fill in. But at the level of the companies, I have never understood why it is so difficult to support families during the maternity years with additional money sometimes. If you really, really want that talent, and it is very obvious where the world is moving, that we are in a constant fight for the best talent, you would pay whatever it is to have that talent. So perhaps you have to internalize that there may be some years in the lives of men and women that you need to make an extra effort if you want to keep them. Perhaps you don't want to keep them at that time. No? And then I think that all the work that has been done on the mentoring, on the sponsorship, how it has moved through different iterations, that has been very good. And something that I have always been very in favor of is that those who mentor or sponsor are not just women, that men can really play a very, very big role. And I look back on my life and I have found like 3 or 4 really key men that at key moments of my career, they push me and they vouch for me. And I think that we should make it a bit less gender specific.
And what was it about them or you that, how did you go about creating those mentors? Was that a conscious decision, or was that did that happen organically?
In my case, it was not a conscious decision. It was just former bosses that really liked what I was doing, or people who saw what I was doing in another capacity, because I had to work on a project with them, and they were impressed, and then they were always there. And the power, what I can really say is that the power of having somebody who has worked for you, speaking highly of you independently, really, really empowers you. But I think that, some people are lucky to have that. Some people are not. We can force it also. So sometimes it's simply that in the offices and the companies, we're all super busy and we are dealing with our issues, and we haven't really spotted the person that we should be helping, or we do, but there are 1 million other things that come during the day. So I am in favor of formalizing all that sometimes. And companies have done a lot on this. This is the bit I think that is working in companies. So all the other areas in terms of the promotion systems, for example, the proper accountability for promotion systems, they go into the 10% at the top of companies. That is where still a lot of work needs to be done.
Interesting. And you made partner at DLA Piper, I think it was in 2006. What was that process like for you?
It was very detailed at the time. That is one of the things that DLA Piper did really well. So you had to, go through a whole process of training, and then there were exams and there were presentations, and I am very in favor of the formalization of those processes. I think that they add a lot, and you think that you know a lot and that you're ready to go to the next step, but sometimes you have to stop before you take the next step and to say, of all the things that I need, do I really have them all covered? And for me, something that I loved and I still do is the commercial side, so the understanding of the budgets, the realizing that at the end of the day, the law is a business and you need to make it workable as a business. That I thought it was actually a joy to go through through that process, but nerve-wracking as well.
It's one of the few times I've heard that it's a joy to make a partner. And you've spoken in the past about being the only woman in the room, and also the only one that realizes that you're the only woman in the room. How has that changed since you've entered the profession?
I don't think that has changed very much. I think that I mentioned it earlier. I think that the lack of women at the very top continues being a very big issue. So, I entered the legal profession very early on, but it wasn't the bad years of the legal profession in the city. So, for example, I have had colleagues who told me about, there was a time that we could not wear trousers, for example. I never lived any of that. but the bit that I have lived at the top, which is that it is mostly men, that is only a very few women, who many of them tend to mimic men and to behave like them, and that sometimes we continue being one or two women in some of the key meetings. That I think that is still ongoing. I don't think that is an issue only for the legal profession. I do part of my career on financial services, and I have seen that a lot in some of the financial services firms, likely not in the one where I am. I see it now here in Silicon Valley in the tech companies. So there is a big issue on making sure that women make it at the very top, and I don't think that much is being done, really. I think that we are kind of accepting that is the way. It's not only an issue of gender, by the way. Yeah? It's an issue of diversity more widely.
And why do you think that is?
Because we lose women during the career. So we are many. You look at any profession. And I have looked at all these professions, in Inspiring Girls. I remember that there was a point that somebody said, why don't we do a 10% event? So we just put girls together with women from sectors where women are only 10%. And I ended up saying, there is no way we are going to do this, because 10% at the top is everywhere. Do you look at any kind of sector, do you look at the very top, and we tend to be 8, 9, 14 maximum, but that is it really in most of the sectors. Now you go at entry level and there are more and more women coming to all professions, including the legal profession. We are majority women, and then we start dropping, and then the maternity years come and we drop more, and then you have already created a gap. So when it goes forward into the promotions, of course, women continue going down, and men going up, and at the top is the wider bridge that you could possibly imagine. So you cannot work on it only by saying, I'm going to have an ad hoc measure to make sure that at the top I saw this. You really have to work it out the hard way throughout the whole career. And, I think that we have to be very realistic. I come from the continental background, that we have a different attitude to quotas than the Anglo-Saxon background. And I have had that discussion many times, and, there are pros and cons for both options. But that kind of works for non-executives at the board, for example. It is very difficult to use that option for the management team and the executive team. And, you could end up being so dirigiste that it would not be almost a business anymore with the freedom that a business needs. No? So I think that the thinking that we are going to have the miracle solution by just imposing a mandatory percentage is just not the answer. We need to work on that and also all the way down the ladder. No?
A lot of law firms are introducing shared parental leave to encourage more fathers to take parental leave. I think the statistics are that not as many are taking at that time. And one of the concerns is the career progression or lack of it if they are to take some time out. What do you think leaders can do to encourage that?
I'm actually in favor of mandatory shared parental leave. I know that it is used in some of the Nordic countries. It has worked out very well, and mandatory. I think that let me refine that. I am in favor that you cannot transfer it. So you don't take it, you lose it altogether, and you cannot pass it on to your partner. I think that a lot of work can be done on refining those options within companies. You can also encourage it. So perhaps you don't need to make it mandatory. You can just encourage it. There are lots of different ways in which companies and governments can nudge the population in a certain direction. And then I also feel that it's really important to have role models, well-known men, and whether it is in the public domain or whether it is in the companies at the very top, who do it and nothing happens. Nothing happens. Basically, if you are in a job and you think that because you are going to disappear, whatever it is, for 4, 8 months, weeks, whatever it is, that you could be sick, and that has happened to you, and you have to be in hospital, and you think that is the end of your career, then you are in the wrong job, right? And you are, hanging in there just in a very precarious manner. No? So yes, I am in favor of all that, but I do think that the issue is not just the parental leave for the whatever it is, the year. In the UK it's a year, in Spain it's 4 months, and there are lots of discussions also about the right length. Is what happens afterwards. I see it myself. Women and the women I interact with, they have an additional burden that men don't have. I always joke that I go through life with a fridge in my head, and in the middle of the most complex trade negotiations or the most intricate investigations, I know what there is in my fridge, and my husband doesn't. So of course he has a space for whatever, thinking about the data policy in the world, or so that I thought.
And you've mentioned, it is interesting that you say that, because I think statistically, globally, women take 75% of home care. And I suspect that figure's been exacerbated by COVID. But I think you mentioned in the past that equality also starts very early on in a relationship, and that truly equal relationships are an exception as opposed to something that's common. I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Well, I think that some of us have to force ourselves to see the equality at every point. Now, I'm very much in favor of couples discussing things in the open. Whenever any young woman or girl asks me, say, what should I do? I'm about to do, what should I do? And I always say, well, talk about it, because you think that this is not going to be an issue, but it is a very defining thing in your life, and depending on what kind of relationship you have, I always think that one of the most important things in the life of anybody is who you decide to have children with. If you decide to have children, perhaps that's not for you, but if you do, that person is with you forever, no matter what. No? So having those discussions early on, and I have never had it in a formal manner, but there was an understanding that we were going to go ahead building an equal family. I think that is very important. But even in my case, for example, because of how I was brought up, and it was a moment of big change in Spain, but still women were doing most of the things in the house, and we would step up at the table, and the men would remain seated, and we would sort of serve them really, and take the dishes away and so on, and that has been, I don't know whether that comes together with the maternal thing or not, but I have found myself sometimes thinking, well, why if my sister, and I was very lucky from the beginning, I had a very good job, so I was always able to have people helping us. But whenever that fails, I'm the one who steps in. And I have thought very often, like, when did I become responsible for this? Why, do I have a closer relationship with my washing machine than my husband? And he didn't ask me. I just stepped in and I started doing it. I'm very often, I think that you need to question yourself is, am I really seeing myself as an equal? Because if you don't see yourself as an equal, nobody else is going to see, So sometimes you step back a little, or you adjust. And I think that's one of the good things of COVID that has had a terrible effect on women. But I think that also in some couples, it has served to expose how much work is hidden there with the children, with the house, that mostly women miraculously do it at a great personal cost and sometimes professional cost for them, and nobody sees. And once that you put it in the open, it's easier sometimes to have the conversation of, well, we have to share this differently, or we have to have another solution.
And apart from discussing it, how do you go about creating those habits, particularly if they haven't been set in stone at the very beginning of a relationship?
But any habits can be changed. There are endless amounts of people and coaches now telling us that we can change everything in our life. Of course, we can change everything in our life. It took a couple of months, and the whole population of the world started walking with masks and traveling or going in a different direction and getting used to a whole range of things that 2 years ago we would have thought that it was impossible that everybody, even some of us, but everybody would end up doing it. So of course you can change habits, and you should never feel trapped. But for me, something, and I have never been part of those people, every couple handles things differently. We have never been very formalistic, and we don't go around saying, this is my 50% and your 50% and whatever. But there is a basis of respect. And to me, that is the key. And sometimes I'm busier, and sometimes my husband is busier, and my children now can step in as well. And I very often say, this is not just about only your happiness, it's the happiness of everybody there. But if you are not in a relationship where you feel there is respect, you really have to think very seriously as to whether that is the right relationship for you.
Absolutely. And just out of interest, I was having a discussion with my friends recently about keeping our maiden names once we got married, and it was fairly heated, but I think the majority have said that they would keep their maiden name, and I think you did professionally. Was that a conscious decision, or is that, I guess, something that just happened?
It wasn't at all. That's the irony of it, because I ended up having a big public fight with some newspapers as to whether I could keep it or not. We simply don't do that in Spain. In Spain, we keep our fathers and our mothers. So I'm González Durántez, my father and my mother, and nobody changes their names. I didn't even think about it, and it didn't come up when I got married, and suddenly I found myself in this big debates. And I think that probably if I had been British, I would have probably kept it. But I probably think that because I have been brought up in a certain way. So that is part of my background. I ultimately think that everybody should decide what they want to do. And this is nobody's business. But I find it weird that if you decide to be called X, somebody else would call you Y. I say, why did you do that? And especially in this time and age, I now live in California. You cannot imagine the pressure there is here on the use of pronouns. So I can decide the pronouns that apply to me, but as a woman, I cannot decide the name that is applied to me. It is completely bizarre, really. And that is the key issue. You know, the issue is not, and in my case, I had a lot of Mrs. Clegg and Lady Clegg and et cetera, and you know perfectly well when somebody's doing that simply because, in my case, my husband was better known publicly, and you know, in order to identify you, they say, what, you know, Nicholas' wife, whatever it is. No? And you know perfectly well how different that is from the cases when they are using that basically to tell you that your only value is because of who you are married to or who you sleep with, you know, and that is a completely different kettle of fish.
How did you deal with that media scrutiny during that time, or even now, I guess?
I always understood that if you are married to a politician, the media scrutiny comes with the territory. It was a little bit different for me because in Spain, the families of the politicians are not in the public light. In the UK and in America, even more so, they are. And I always accepted that, you know, that was going to be part of the deal. I initially struggled a bit with it, and you know, there was a lot of, I cannot believe that after all the work I have done in my life, now the issue is the color of my shoes or the shape of my derrière or whatever it is. But there you are. There is a lot of very conservative, old-fashioned, nationalistic media in the country. Unfortunately, I think it's one of the worst things we have, and you just have to deal with it. For me, there was a very big moment when I realized I should be doing something with it. So if I'm going to pay this price, I should be using it for something positive, which is why I used it to set up at the beginning inspiring women and then inspiring girls. And then something wonderful has been social media. I use a lot of Instagram. You know, for me, it was the difference between they say something which is not true about you, and you have to convince the editor to put it in the bottom left corner of page 44 or whatever in a manipulated manner, or you can just say yourself, you know, this is how it is and I disagree with this, and boy, I have big arguments with some of the key editors. But I have to say that all of them, pretty much all of them, with the exception of one, the previous editor of the Daily Mail, not the current one, all of them have helped in inspiring girls, and we have had support from the FT to the Daily Mail and everything that there is in between. So you can also build a constructive relationship.
That's amazing, and congratulations. I think this year marks the 5th anniversary. Now you're in over 26 countries. What was it like getting that off the ground?
Well, it was wonderful, really, and it was just almost by chance. Also, I was on holiday, and I don't know what was the last thing that somebody in the media has said about me that was a little bit upsetting, and whatever, a sexist comment. I was thinking, like, why do we women have to go through all this? And I had read something that shocked me a lot, which is some research from the Girl Guide saying that girls felt that they didn't have enough access to female role models. And it's something that kept coming back because any single time, because I think that in the UK very early on, the label of professional woman was put onto me, and which basically means that any gender event in London, I'm invited to it, so it has good things. But in any single interview, I was being asked, don't you think that there are not enough female role models? And it's the kind of question that makes me hit the roof, really, because it's like, there are so many. You know, you go to the street, to the supermarket, to any company, to your house, wherever it is, there are amazing women. The issue is not that they are not there, is that you don't put the spotlight on them, so you don't see them. The girls don't see them. No? So like, why don't we do something on this? And, you know, if I'm going to suffer these stupid articles, why don't we use this to create something a little bit new, so that we move the media to help also on this, and I invited 10 women, very well-known women in the UK. I knew some of them, some others it was almost like cold calling. And before I could send all the 10 emails, 8 of them had already accepted. And I realized that this was going to be a success, as indeed has been, because we are in 26 countries and growing at the rate of a country per month. We have 3 more coming before the end of the year. And it is because of 2 things, because it's a very, very simple idea. So it's not complicated. Everybody can do it. It's just about, talking to the girls through a variety of means that we expose and we prepare for women and girls. And also because at the end of the day, it's about doing things. And a lot of the gender debate is about complaining, it's about talking, it's about we identify the problem, we measure the problem, we talk about the problem, we redefine the problem, whatever it is. But cannot we just do things, even if it's small, something positive? And I think that's why it has been so successful.
And what are the plans for the next 5 years?
Well, we are having now, the plan is expanding, but not just expanding in terms of countries. People look at, 26 countries, wow. And we have ourselves a little bit of we want more and we want to be everywhere. But it's also expanding in terms of how we make the female role models available to girls, and also the diversity of the role models. So this is not just about the well-known women or the women of a certain age or the women of a certain background. There has to be all sorts of women there, because it's up to girls to decide who do they look up to and who they feel a connection with. So that is very much, the deepening of it, not just the geographical extension, is very much what is there in the cards for us in the next 5 years, but also the means to do that. So we do, we bring women back to schools for an hour. We ask for 1 hour per year per woman. That's a lot of work has been done on that in all the countries where we are present. We do speed datings. We bring the girls to the companies. We do career fairs. We have a video hub so that if the girls are not close to the role models, they can see videos and then interact virtually. And something that we are working on now that I'm super hopeful for is a digital media campaign to make the female role models available to girls via social media, so that the girls follow women who inspire them, and the women are there, the girls are there. So it has to be very easy that those women get into the feed of the girls, and ideally, because of how the feed works, it will keep suggesting other inspiring women so that we take it all in the positive direction.
So anyone listening, how can they get involved?
Well, it's very easy. You just go to the website of Inspiring Girls, which is www.inspiring-girls.com. And you can now register to be a role model. And I really should stress, every woman is welcome. And I keep finding women who say, but do you think that the girls are going to find me interesting? And the answer is, I don't know you, but the answer is, of course. I have never had a girl saying about a woman, you are not there is something positive that they can take from your experience. So register there, and you would be contacted in terms of virtual events or in-person events. They think a little bit that it really goes with the schools, most of it. So during the summer years and September, there is a little bit less activity because the schools are not working or they are very busy, and then it picks up. But the other thing that you can do is to join the digital media campaign that we are launching. It is called This Little Girl Is Me. So just look for that hashtag, and all that we are asking women to do is that they publish a picture of when they were little. They say what they wanted to be at that time. They tell a little bit of their story or an advice that they would have given to their little themselves. And like that, with that hashtag, we will get the girls just going through the hashtag and choosing one woman to follow, so that we really get more and more girls following inspiring women and creating a snowball effect. And there are amazing women who have agreed to participate, from Melinda Gates to Sheryl Sandberg to Christine Lagarde, Kristalina Georgieva, Annie Lennox, Martina Navratilova. I mean, you name it, from lots of different backgrounds. Musun Al-Meleya, June Sarpon, is fantastic. But those are only the known women. We just want thousands, ideally millions of women from all walks of life. And the real issue is to put the spotlight on those women who are not so well known, but are equally inspiring to girls.
That's incredible. I'll definitely sign up right after this. I'll leave it with the last question, and it ties into what you just said in terms of what you would give, what advice you would give to your younger self.
I think that probably that there is a time for everything, and I'm very persistent. I push things forward, and I want things to change and to change very quickly. And sometimes, when you're 53 years old as I am, you can look backwards and think, well, sometimes we're meant to work in a certain direction, but not precisely at the time when I wanted them, and you just need to keep going. So I think that at a personal level, that is probably what I would have told myself, but more widely, something that I would have told myself, and I indeed say this to every girl I meet, is that I could have made sure that throughout my life, I was much more connected to politics. I think that one of the big issues that my generation did was to abandon politics a bit. And we just, we dealt with our lives and busy times of our family life, our careers, and we disregarded a bit the public policy side. And I think that is why we are in the situation where we are today, that we have people in governments in lots of different countries that are not the right people. And it's because we have left a space there that we should have never left. So that is the course correction I would have done if I could go back.
Yeah, I guess we all have to pull together to make those structural necessary changes. Well, thank you so much. That's been so inspiring, and it's been lovely to hear more about your career, and especially about inspiring girls as well. It's such an amazing initiative. So I'm sure lots of people will be signing up, and thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I hope to see you in the Inspiring Girls campaign.